Hey, what is up everybody? Platform Disciple here, and today I'm going to review the 5 new cards from the upcoming community set that is available for pre-order right now. So if you go to the store, you'll be able to find this Sins of Torment community set pre-order. You might have to scroll down a little bit to find it, and ordering this will guarantee you a full playset in Platinum Border of the 5 new cards. And as a reminder, Platinum Borders are only available during the pre-order period. So if you do want to get those, you have to order them now. You can't do that later. And I should also mention here that you have the chance of getting these cards in foil. So if you are a gambling person, you can purchase this pre-order multiple times to try to get better odds at getting those foils that you would like. Okay, and with that out of the way, let's talk about these cards. There are 5 of them. There's 2 commons, a rare, and 2 epics. And the first card we're going to talk about is a common. It is Infernal Chef. And Infernal Chef is absolutely a nod to the original Descendants of the Dragons chef. And you can see here they even have like the same outfit. So there's a possibility here that it could even be like the same individual character. Maybe they've been corrupted by the exiles. But I will leave that to people who care a little more about the lore to tell me. But anyways, the new chef is a pretty interesting card because it can grant consume to other characters. And consume is a very powerful effect, especially on characters that are defending and therefore can interact with multiple attackers and potentially grow very large very quickly, or on characters that have unstoppable and therefore can kill lots of characters in one turn in a similar way. And just as a reminder here, consume, when a character with consume kills another character in combat, it gains attack and health equal to its consume value and also heals an amount equal to its consume value. So it can be quite devastating against decks that run lots of smaller characters. Now, what's kind of weird about this card is that the way that Infinity Wars combat works, the character to the left of Infernal Chef is going to see a whole lot more action than the character to the right of Infernal Chef, especially given that Infernal Chef itself is quite fragile. So it's unlikely that it can survive attacking most defenders or receiving an attack from most attackers. So for that reason, if you want to get the maximum value out of Infernal Chef, you could potentially buff Infernal Chef to make sure that it survives, and then both characters, one to the left and one to the right of it, can take advantage of that consume. But I think that there is an argument that it might be more optimal just to care about the character on the left of Infernal Chef to try to maximize its value and just disregard the fact that it gives consume to the character on the right, because most of the time it's going to be a lot of trouble to try to profit off of that. So that's Infernal Chef. Pretty fun card, and I do appreciate the nod to the original chef. So let's take a look at our next common here, which is Nimble Trickery. It is a 1-cost ability, and it is preemptive, so it resolves before other effects in the turn, other than deploy effects, and it helps you disrupt your opponent's removal. You choose one of your characters, and if it becomes targeted by an ability this turn, other than Nimble Trickery, that ability gets redirected at random to a different deployed character you control. So you can potentially protect your most important character from removal. And I think the most logical comparison to make here is going to be to a Veror card, which is Redirect, which is quite similar in that it can protect a single character, but Redirect is a little more versatile, I think. Admittedly, they function a little differently. Redirect affects the first ability played regardless of what it targets, and Nimble Trickery protects one specific unit you control. But the advantage to Redirect is that you can potentially 2-for-1 your opponent, because you might effectively counter their removal spell while also turning it back on them and killing one of their things. Redirect historically has been a pretty skill testing card. It's not easy to use, and the fail case where you miss with it and don't manage to take advantage of one of your opponent's effects can be pretty devastating to spend a card and those two resources to do nothing. Nimble Trickery, because it's a little bit less expensive to play, I think might have a bigger place in gameplay, but I do think it's kind of a niche effect, and I'm curious to see how and where people choose to take advantage of the card. Okay, and next we have our rare here, which is, I think, probably the most interesting card of these, in my opinion, which is Jewel of Madness. And although it doesn't say it on this preview image, it is an artifact, so you can't play multiple of these and just get, or well, you can't recycle them, I should say, and get a massive hand size. I believe you can have 3 Jewel of Madnesses out, but what it does is it increases your maximum hand size by 2, and at the start of your turn, you draw an additional card if you have 6 or more cards in hand. So what excites me about this effect is it could be a very, very powerful tool for control decks to take advantage of, where you can have an extremely juicy hand size and also be drawing multiple cards a turn to fuel your ability to remove your opponent's cards from play. Just have a constant stream of removal. I think also of note, it helps you leverage some cards that tend to overfill your hand a little frequently. So the card that comes to mind for me, which also has Demon Synergy, so could be paired well with the Exiles, is Scepter of the Deep. It's very easy to overfill your hand with Scepter of the Deep, so could be a potential combination there. That being said, I will say that I find Jewel of Madness to be kind of a surprising card to see in Exiles, because it has asynergistic properties with a lot of the Exiles cards. Many of the Exile cards encourage you to empty your hand. Exiles have a lot of cards that are very good at emptying your hand, or are payoffs for emptying your hand, or are cards that specifically benefit from being discarded. So Jewel of Madness is a card that I think if you're using it, potentially rules out a lot of other Exiles cards that you don't want to combine it with. It's interesting, but I do feel like this effect would be more appropriate in Veror. But the cool thing about Infinity Wars is if you think it's more appropriate in Veror, you can put it in a Veror deck as long as you have one Exiles commander. Okay, and we have 2 epics. So the first one here is Insane Reliquary, which is a unique artifact. And this card is quite interesting because you can get one into play, and while it's in play, whenever you discard a card, a random character in your deck and a random deployed character you control both gain +1/+1. So that's the payoff for actually playing the card. However, it also has a payoff for discarding it or removing it from the game while it's in your hand. So you can play one, and then your additional copies that you cannot play because they're unique, you can discard for a small bonus. And that small bonus is that when you discard or remove it, it gives a random character in your deck +1/+1, and it also shuffles an additional copy of Insane Reliquary into your deck. So you will have a constant resupply of Insane Reliquaries that you can discard in the future. I think this card is really interesting. I do not know how good it is. It might be great, but it's pretty hard for me to evaluate because it's quite different than a lot of effects that we've had historically. I think the card that reminds me of it the most is Biganator, which Biganator here is a character that kind of has an effect like Insane Reliquary, where if you discard a card, Biganator gets +1/+1. And Biganator is actually pretty good. So Insane Reliquary is kind of like a passive Biganator effect that sits on your board. You don't get to choose where the +1/+1 goes, but it might go somewhere better than the Biganator would be, because the Biganator is not a character that starts out particularly big. So could be interesting, could be good. All right, and our final card here, another epic. It's a returning character, and that's Nisra the Ravenous. So this is one of many iterations of Nisra that we've seen, and this one's pretty fun. So it is a unique character. It is a demon. It's a 4-cost 5/5, which is very poor stats for its cost, but its effect probably makes up for it because I think it grows quite quickly. And it has consume too, but in addition to that, whenever a deployed character you control dies, Nisra consumes. And in this case, that's going to mean Nisra gets +2/+2. So Nisra is growing quite quickly. Admittedly, if Nisra overeats, it becomes exhausted. So every third consume that it makes, it exhausts, which is going to remove it from the assault zone or the defense zone, which is a pretty meaningful drawback because it means that you have to be quite careful with where you place Nisra, because if you place it too far back in the assault zone or the defense zone, you might lose the opportunity for Nisra to actually do what you want it to do. And interestingly, the card that Nisra reminds me the most of, let's see if I can find it, is Zombie Scavenger. And the reason that this Nisra reminds me of Zombie Scavenger is that both of them are getting +2/+2 when one of your characters die. Now, the upside of Nisra, of course, is that you don't have to be reliant on undead characters. You can play whatever you want, and Nisra is still going to get big. And then Nisra also just has consume in addition to its effect. But I think that I'm not sure whether or not Nisra's ability that removes him from combat when he eats a third character, that might be a really, really real drawback. It's hard to say without having played it, but I suspect that that is going to happen pretty often, and that if you aren't very careful, that is going to be a huge disruption to your game plan. And that is all 5 of the cards. I think these mini sets are very fun. I think they help keep the game fresh in a way that is not massively disruptive, so we can see some cards fill out some different decks and invite some new strategies into the game while allowing old strategies to still exist and thrive. So, very excited. Hope you enjoyed, and until next time, see you around.